Hello, everyone. I'm Sheila Hollis. Pleasure to be with you today. I'm of counsel with Duane Morris Law Firm and served on its executive committee for a number of years and serve now proudly on the diversity committee of Duane Morris. I'm here to introduce an outstanding panel of outstanding people, two extraordinary women who have played key roles in women in the legal profession throughout their careers. Our next session is going to be an interview dialogue between Roberta Liebenberg, a longtime friend, and Connie Collingsworth, an outstanding leader in her own right, who will be introduced in more detail by Bobby. Bobby is a senior partner at Fine Kaplan and Black in Philadelphia, and she focuses her practice on antitrust and complex commercial litigation. And that's her daytime job, but the rest of her life is very, very devoted to work on behalf of women in the profession and work on behalf of the profession in general. She is a principal also in the Red B group, and she served twice as chair of the ABA's Commission on Women in the Profession. And she herself is a recipient of the Margaret Brent Award. She's chair of the Philadelphia Women's Group in Pennsylvania Bar Association, Women in the Profession, and she chaired a variety of other major leadership roles in Philadelphia. And she is also recognized as just an outstanding Philadelphian and outstanding Pennsylvanian, not the least of which is reflected in a recent award in which she was named a Distinguished Daughter of Pennsylvania by then Governor Edward Rendell. So it is a great honor and pleasure to be with you and to voice the support of Duane Morris for this outstanding program with outstanding women and leaders in our profession, who certainly will lead with grace, dignity, but with a firm and dedicated hand to increase the opportunities for women at all levels in the profession of law. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be part of the ABA and to serve on a board of governors on behalf of the section of Environment, Energy, Resources. And it's an honor to be with you today. God bless America. God bless the women in America. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I'm Bobby Liebenberg, and it is my great honor to serve as one of the co-chairs of the World Forum. I'm also the former chair of the ABA Commission on Women in the Profession. I'm a partner in the law firm of Fine Kaplan and Black in Philadelphia and a principal in the Red B Consulting Group. This first ever global conference of women leaders in the legal profession brings together a remarkable group of women lawyers who've used their voices, their power, their influence to transform the landscape for women, both here in the United States and around the world. It is my great privilege to interview one of these extraordinary women leaders, Connie Collingsworth, who has long been at the vanguard of the effort to promote gender equality and social and economic justice. Connie is the Chief Operating Officer and the Chief Legal Officer of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. In her role, she is in charge of the foundation's legal affairs and its day-to-day operations, providing guidance and leading strategic planning and support of the foundation's important missions. She also serves on the board of directors of several companies, including Primero Blue Cross and the Banner Corporation, and has extensive nonprofit governance experience. Connie, it is wonderful to have this opportunity to talk with you today. And I want to first start by asking you to describe your role, your current role at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and how it's evolved over the years since you started there in 2002. I imagine you've seen quite a bit of change.
Thank you, Bobby, and thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this conference. And people should know Bobby and I have gotten to know each other through her role at Direct Women Institute. And that was an organization that I had the benefit of participating in back in 2009 as part of pushing for greater board diversity, and have just enjoyed the relationship with Bobby all of these years since. So it's a real special honor to have this conversation with you today. Answering your question, the role at the foundation has evolved quite a bit since I started almost 19 years ago in 2002. I was hired originally as the foundation's first lawyer, and at that time there were approximately 100 employees total. And the foundation grew much more than anyone, I think, anticipated. No one dreamed that we would receive the gift of generosity from Warren Buffett back in 2006. That's part of the reason for the growth. Then when Bill retired from Microsoft and decided to focus his full time, and then Melinda really increased her engagement and voice as their children got older, it's just been an amazing opportunity to be in the front row of what's happened at the foundation. And it's a unique opportunity that I was there and was able to grow professionally and personally as part of that growth. So the opportunity to build a first-class legal team, which now has over 40 individuals, and I have promoted 2 individuals who manage the day-to-day of the legal work now at the foundation, although I retain the title Chief Legal Officer as the legal advisor to the executive leadership team and the trustees. But most of my day now is spent in the role of the Chief Operating Officer, which includes managing IT, global security, grants and contracts management, HR, and some other of the day-to-day operational functions. It's been a particularly interesting year in particular because that included the role of being the incident commander for COVID and managing the issues across the world in our 9 regional offices, including China, which we had to lock down first almost exactly a year ago now when this virus started in the first place. But another element of the foundation's growth in the last few years has been to create a number of affiliated organizations that do day-to-day operational work, including the Gates Medical Research Institute and the Gates Ag One for Innovation, which is an agricultural innovation and technology group. So my role includes serving as the general counsel for those entities and helping with their operational support as part of our grander global enterprise. So the job just gets more interesting all the time.
So that is quite a large portfolio of which you have responsibility. I know you were quite intentional in trying to get the title of Chief Operating Officer. And what were some of the advantages? Why was that something that you thought was important in terms of your career plan?
Well, part of my goal was to make the foundation well run, and I enjoyed the operational elements of even being a lawyer, trying to make sure we're efficient with our contracting process, knowledge management, the things that make you an efficient and effective lawyer aside from the legal advice. And there were things I'd observed about our grant-making systems, for example, that I thought we could do better. And so when I had the opportunity to become the executive sponsor of the creation of a whole new investment management system, we give out approximately over typically $6 billion a year. Last year it was almost 7.5 because of the increase for COVID. And I felt like we could do better in the way that we managed that process. And so I was always told, no, that's legal. That's not you. Yeah. And so I really looked for the opportunity to take on those functions and responsibilities that I could have an impact in making sure the foundation was well run in executing on its mission. And as each of those things were taken on, I was asked to then take on more. And I did, though, intentionally at some point say along the way, having the title of Chief Operating Officer would also help me for one of my other goals and my personal passion, which is increasing board diversity. And I realized there is a barrier for women and lawyers in general to get on boards because it's often said, I don't need a lawyer in my skill set box. I have a general counsel. And it's really part of the objective of Direct Women, as well as lawyers applying for board seats, to describe themselves as a strategic advisor. And I think the doors open wider but it's even much easier if you're a chief operating officer because you have a broader perspective about the operations of the business as a whole. And my ultimate long-term goal is to continue to work on the boards. And so I knew that would position me better. But my first objective was to make the foundation well run. And it really was part of that goal that led me to take on the additional responsibilities.
Well, knowing you well, and this will be a common theme of our conversation, is how you approach things with intentionality. Prior to joining the foundation, you had quite a successful legal career. You were a partner in Preston Gates, which was the predecessor law firm to K&L Gates. You concentrated your practice in corporate law and investment equity, and private equity investments. And you were a member of the firm's executive committee. So what made you make that shift? You were a success. What made you, sort of evaluate that I want to make a shift and go into the nonprofit world and take my skills and do something different?
It was back at the end of the dot-com era that I became a little bit disillusioned with the practice of law. I love doing deals. And I love sitting at a table and negotiating transactions. And it's the one thing I miss about not practicing law day to day is doing deals, frankly. And I had an experience with another firm that's well known, I won't name and shame, where we'd sent documents over for a series investment where I was representing the company that was receiving venture capital funding. And the lawyer on the other side that I was talking with said they couldn't change the form because the form was what it was. And I was trying to convey that it wasn't a matter of the form. It was that the deal was not properly reflected in the terms of the transaction. And the person was pretty rigid. I think they developed an approach where they just churned through these transactions and had really put the word out that this is the deal, take it or leave it. And what I was trying to convey is it wasn't the classic indemnification clause negotiation, but that it didn't reflect the terms of the transaction accurately. And I said to myself, if this is what the practice of law is going to be like in the world of computers and passing things back and forth, and if, as it was in the dot-com era, there was a lot of situations that I felt were driven mostly by people who were rich wanting to get richer. And I just thought, I want to look back at the end of my legal career and feel like I did more than collect a stack of lucite cubes. But I wasn't unhappy with the firm. I was very happy and was in, as you said, management at the firm, and wasn't expecting to leave. But when then another former partner of mine, there were two individuals, came to me and said, there's this opportunity at the Gates Foundation. They're going to hire a general counsel. You should apply. I think those experiences made me much more receptive than I might have otherwise been. And I knew that at some point, given Bill's wealth, that it would get larger. Who could have dreamed it would become what it is today? But it was equivalent to some of my practice because I'd worked with a lot of startups. And the way I describe the foundation to people is it was a family-run startup with just way too much money. And there was nothing in place. There were no policies. There was no conflicts policy. There was no contract database. There were no templates. There were no systems. And so it was an amazing opportunity to start something from scratch, and do amazing good, but not have the tension you often have in a nonprofit to raise money or to worry about your next grant. In fact, our challenge was giving away that much money responsibly. And so it was really quite an amazing opportunity that I just couldn't pass up. And so I was very fortunate to be selected for that role.
Several studies have shown that, in particular, women CEOs and women executives change their career trajectories in order to leverage their skills to broaden the better good for the community, for the organization's employees, and if applicable, the shareholder. So you are a great example and personification of that research. I want to move on, and it's something you touched on in the beginning, and that is over the past several months, there's been much more emphasis and a real recommitment to implementing effective diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies and initiatives. How did you build diverse teams at the foundation?
I think it goes back to the point you made earlier about intentionality. And I have a very diverse leadership team, some could argue I don't. Actually, I'm missing the diversity. I don't currently have a white male on my leadership team. I have several other males that are of other ethnic backgrounds, but I actually am sensitive to the fact that I think it's not about a check the box of one of this and one of that, but what you really get from diversity is diversity of thought and diversity of perspective. And I've never felt like I had to search specifically. I've always had an openness, or actually even probably a broader receptiveness to different backgrounds. I grew up in the Midwest. I do not come from an Ivy League background. I actually prefer people that have different life experiences because of the richness that they bring. And maybe a little bit because of how they had to fight to get to where they got. And so I've always looked for that type of person in the recruiting process, and it resulted in a very diverse leadership team. And I feel like I've had a huge benefit from the type of leaders that have really contributed immensely to the success, because really they do the work. And as I've gone up higher and the team has gotten larger, just being able to delegate and turn the things over to these people is really what I attribute a lot of what we've accomplished to. But it is a high priority for me. And there was a period in the last timeframe, 2019, where I was also for a period the foundation's interim CHRO. And the very first decision I made was to hire our chief diversity officer, who is fantastic. Leslie Mays is an African-American woman that has been working with us on the last 14 months now on developing a new DEI strategic initiative framework for the foundation. And I'm so glad we got that work started in 2019 before all of the civil unrest and challenges of the last year. But we're getting ready to adopt that, including the measures. And I serve as the co-chair of the foundation's DEI Leadership Council. And it's my way, again, of helping us at the foundation do measurable things and not just have vision statements, but actual things that you can point to that will move the needle on who we work with grantees, with our vendors, with leadership accountability, with talent, all of those things. But again, relying on a very strong, experienced leader that has done this successfully before. And without her expertise and knowledge and insights, we wouldn't be where we are today. And I just recognize that as part of the recruitment process and think that's what really has driven me to take that approach.
And does this same accountability and measurement, how does that impact how you choose your outside counsel and the diversity you seek with your outside counsel? Because I'm sure the foundation employs outside counsel as well.
Yes, we do. And I've been involved for several years in pushing one of the leaders, one of my general counsels, Keith Matthews, is an African-American male that has helped lead that work in putting in place requirements that outside counsel have to have diverse teams. But not only that, one of the things that I think I realized from having been a partner and understanding how compensation works at law firms, I was on the firm's compensation committee, it's not just showing up at the RFP with a nice room of diverse people. It's who has the work as far as responsibility, and then who gets the credit for that work. And I think there's a huge opportunity as the buyer of legal services to tell the law firm who you think should get that credit. You're the buyer. And I know how work used to get allocated and how those dollars were hoarded, basically because of the value. And I think it's very appropriate for the client to be disruptive and to give their opinion. And you can't, in the end, control their comp structure, but you can certainly have an influence and impact on who it is that is your point person and how they get recognized for serving in that role. And obviously, having the Gates Foundation as one of your clients is something a lot of firms would like, and they listen to you. And so I think there's an opportunity to use your voice and have some impacts in the way that system has historically really favored certain groups over others.
And again, the commission research is quite extensive in showing that the client can really use its economic clout to drive this type of change. So it's wonderful to hear this, and it's a wonderful message for our audience to hear. You spoke a little bit about who succeeded you as the chief legal officer. And again, I think this is another issue that's really important in terms of what are the plans of succession and how can we ensure that diverse attorneys are in that line of succession. And I know the audience would love to hear your thoughts about how you did it and how you think other organizations should be thinking about this.
So the two individuals that were named as general counsel when I became the COO are Lauren Bright, who is also the manager of our DC office, our largest regional office, which has over 100 employees in DC, as well as Keith Matthews. They're both African American, and Lauren in particular has been on my legal team for over 15 years. And Keith joined the foundation almost 11 years ago to lead the work we were doing in venture capital type investments called program-related investments. But since this is a group of lawyers, you probably know those terms more than other audiences might. But it was clearly my goal always. I feel very strongly that one of the important parts of governance, if you're sitting on a board, one of the main jobs of governance is succession planning. And I think that the best thing a leader can do is walk away and not have a ripple at all. That is a testament, and not the idea of making pain or people feeling like, oh gosh, we need you. I think that's ineffective leadership. And so getting people like Lauren and Keith lined up to take on the role, which they're doing fabulously. They've just finished a reorganization of the team that reflects the addition of these new affiliates. They bring new, fresh perspectives to the table. And I think that's really healthy. And I'm just thrilled that I've got strong, diverse leaders that have been with me as long as they have, that I have that much confidence in. But I feel, some people may say, well, Connie's following this current fad. No, I hired these people 10 and 15 years ago and worked hard that they would be mentored not only by myself, but other leaders so that they had the confidence of the others in the executive team. Lauren worked most directly for most of the 15 years with our new CEO, Mark Sussman, because she supported the work of global policy and advocacy. And he's got so much confidence in her from having worked with her as the president of that division, that she's well set up now relative to his role as CEO. And similarly with Keith in the work that he's done in the divisions that he supported. And that continuity is just part of, again, setting up the organization well. Sometimes you need to bring in people from the outside, but my best goal always is to look first internally as part of keeping people challenged and helping people to grow professionally.
Great advice, investing in talent and making sure they have the experiences and the opportunities to grow. Just as great advice. I know the audience is going to be very interested that, especially because this conference is taking place during the middle of the COVID-19 crisis, and the foundation has extensive knowledge and expertise in developing vaccines around the world. And I wanted to know, what has the foundation's role been in using its knowledge and its expertise in addressing the current COVID-19 crisis?
And that would take a long time. And so I'm trying, how do I describe? We have been very active with respect in particular to advocating for the need that the vaccines not be hoarded by the rich countries, but that we think that this pandemic isn't over for the world until the whole world gets the benefit of these new amazing vaccines that have been developed at a just unprecedented pace. And so a lot of our effort has been to bring attention through the voice of our co-chairs to the whole issue in the first place, which originally was downplayed. But I know people like stories, and it is now one of my favorite stories to tell that I was visiting Africa and our regional offices in Ethiopia and South Africa last February as part of my role as COO. And the very first grants that we made were to the African CDC and the Africa WHO. So we also went to the Congo as part of that to meet with the organizations. And we thought that the worst part of the world that would suffer would be the developing countries. Who would have dreamed that the US would be the worst off at this point in time? So we had given grants to those organizations to help them prepare. And we flew from South Africa to Ethiopia. And when we walked off the plane, every passenger was required to have their temperature taken and to stop and write down their contract information for tracing. That was last February. And they're still not doing those things here today in this country. And it is amazing. But I think the foundation has always been advocating for testing, for working on diagnostics, for also thinking about therapeutics, our areas of funding. But our biggest focus going forward is with respect to ramping up the manufacture and delivery and distribution of the vaccine in the less developed countries that really couldn't negotiate those original bilateral agreements with the major big pharma companies. So we negotiate on behalf with the Serum Institute, which is doing the manufacture of a fair amount of vaccines. We're working with the creation of this facility called COVAX, which is a multinational collaboration of governments pooling forces to work with the Global Alliance Vaccine Initiative to fund what really can't otherwise be expected to be paid for by these other developing countries. And we won't get back to the world being open and accessible to everyone until this vaccine has a broader distribution, because the world is just too much one ecosystem today. So a lot of time and effort by a lot of individuals was shifted at the foundation to really rally and come to bring our expertise to these particular areas.
And it's so important because this probably, unfortunately, will not be the only pandemic that the world is going to face. So we thank the foundation for all of its work and efforts. It's such important work. I know it must be, makes you so proud to be part of the organization working on that.
Well, it is an interesting, again, front row seat to have, to sit in the briefings every week with the scientists and hear about the latest development, whether it be the mutations or the results of the vaccine efficacy the minute they're available, or all of the details of the deals that we did last year to help facilitate some of these partnerships that need to come together for an effective distribution network that really doesn't exist today.
Another really consequence of the pandemic is its impact on women, and how women have really disproportionately shouldered the burden of childcare and homeschooling and housekeeping to the point that we know that women are 3 times more likely to leave work than men, and the resulting she-cession that we are now facing. In fact, I read Melinda Gates' interview talking about how the child care system is simply broken in the United States, and that women are paying the price of that. And so again, you know, what can organizations do to address this in a broader structural fashion?
Well, you're right. Melinda is really, using her voice in this way. And I think that's one of the takeaways about the foundation. People may be a bit overwhelmed by our size relative to the size of employees or the amount of our endowment resources, but really it's the voice of both Bill and Melinda that can have the most impact. And I'm very proud of the way Melinda is using her voice to bring these issues to the forefront. And she was speaking even before the pandemic about the way the US in particular has lagged from other industrial countries with respect to family leave. And now this new issue about the impact of the pandemic on the women in the workforce with children at home, as you describe, and all the other burdens. She's really bringing attention to it. And it does get to the issue of we're still pretty archaic with respect to our work practices, our flexibility, our expectations. I think there will be huge changes in the way work is done generally, just like we're doing this conference virtually. And I think that there could be some real positives. But in the interim, I think we've still let the traditional role models dictate who's expected to teach the children, who's expected to give up their priority of a career. And that has to change, or we'll step back, as you described, generations of progress that we've made. And so hopefully there'll be a silver lining where some of these issues that were easy to ignore will be screaming out at us from a practical perspective, because we're losing incredibly talented resources that businesses have invested in that we can't afford to lose. So we need to both figure out smarter ways to support the children in education systems. There's huge problems with that as well. Huge racial disparities with respect to access to digital and online learning, which is another thing the foundation is ramping up its work on as a part of this pandemic. But also just the basic policies about work time, about commuting, telecommuting, and family leave in general need much more attention at the legislative, but also at the corporate level.
I'm going to continue on the sort of the pandemic theme, because it has been a time when, and our data is showing that folks are just burnt out. They're exhausted, they're anxious, they're stressed. So I want to ask, how do you deal with this? And most importantly, how do you keep your teams resilient and optimistic and really engaged, especially in remote work?
I think that there are a lot of things you can't control because everybody's situation is different. So there's no one size fits all, which is one of the things we learned. We created a task force called Project Next that's run out of a group from my team, the business design team, to think about the future of work and what changes we could make. But in the interim, the foundation has been very generous in giving stipends to let people acquire some of the things they need to build out their home office with respect to computers and chairs and other things like that. We've really put a lot of focus on wellness. We put a huge amount of time into educating managers and setting up manager channels for them to understand, because that seems to be the key, is making sure your manager understands what your particular needs are, encouraging people to speak up and say, my issue is I have an elderly parent who can't get out and needs to have their medication picked up, or whatever it is. But what we've encouraged people to say is, you have to tell us what your needs are. We don't know. And that would be unique. You wouldn't traditionally have asked employees to share as much personal information. And you have to be willing to engage with your employees one-on-one to understand how you need to accommodate them, because it's very different depending on whether they are the sole breadwinner, whether or not they've got another partner, whether they are able to leverage grandparents. And we looked at the data. How many of we did surveys, how many of our employees do have young children at home? But you have to be a bit careful. I think sometimes the loudest voices speak up and may distort what the needs are versus really understanding the facts. So those are some of the things that we've done as an organization. I'll confess to you, there's something we did that I would recommend everyone can do, but I know it's not practical or realistic, but the foundation has a huge push at the end of the year to pay out its grants and other investments. And we have, for the last few years, actually closed the foundation work. And so I've just come back from a break. And I know this is being recorded a little early, but the amount of benefit it gave to people to recharge and literally not be on email and expect to be behind just because they took a vacation has been a dramatic difference in people's mental state. So we developed something even separate from the holidays called quiet weeks. where everyone was working, but we said reduce your meetings and only if they're necessary. And so we've instituted a few quiet weeks because the Zoom fatigue factor has been just huge. And I think there's nothing that you can do to replace the lack of social interaction. You can do fun things. We did a gingerbread building house as part of my team event virtually, and everyone enjoyed that. But you still don't have those casual conversations in the hallway. You can't make up for that, even with a lot of cocktail hours. Personally, I think I've done a number of things to help with my own boundaries at home. And I'm very religious about walking 5 miles a day and starting and ending the day in certain ways. I missed out on, used to go to the gym. And so I do a FaceTime with my trainer and I schedule it intentionally at 3:30 in the afternoon. It's nothing I could have ever done before. And it takes 5 minutes to walk to the other room and do some stretching and exercising and things that nature. And I think that's an example of where you can take advantage of things such as not having the commute and not just add 2 more hours of work, but be very intentional. Yet again, Bobby, as you say, about how you want to take advantage of this unique time that we're in to make sure that you take care of yourself and really prioritize your needs, especially as this time keeps getting extended.
Just great tips, both personally and for organizations to think about. And I think especially having that quiet week sounds wonderful because we know again from data that people are feeling like their day never ends. It just bleeds in from day to weekend. And there are those issues around boundaries. So again, great advice. A lot of this time working remotely has allowed people to sort of reassess their own career goals and to reflect about what they want to do. And one of my questions to you is, as people may embark on that, what advice would you give to your younger self? What do you think you wish you had known as now or earlier?
I think that one of the failings of law school is that it doesn't teach lawyers to be managers. It teaches you to be an excellent lawyer, but you spend 3 years there and they spend 0 time. And if you're successful as a lawyer, odds are very high that you'll become a manager in one way or the other. You'll manage as a partner a number of associates. You'll manage a big legal case. You'll manage a law firm. You'll manage your own sole proprietorship. You'll be a general counsel or you'll be a deputy general counsel. All of those things are management that I have really tried to invest a lot in late in my career to make sure that I've thought more intentionally about what it is to be a good manager. And my newest resolution for the year is to add podcasts to my walking about those topics. And actually another thing I've done to stay connected to my team is I send them a message, a periodic message. At first it was every week and that was too much. And it's turned into a monthly message. And this last message that went out this week was soliciting from the team of 350 people, give me ideas of good leadership podcasts that you think would make me be a better leader for you. And they're pouring in. And I think communication is one of the things, as well as empathy. But I didn't know that. What I thought was put your head down, do a good job, and you'll be recognized. Guess what? I don't think that's the best advice. I think you have to do more than that. You can be an excellent lawyer, but to really stand out, you have to raise your hand. You have to be able to take risks. You have to take on things you don't know. And that, to me, probably the best thing that happened to set me up for the COO role was saying, I want to be the executive sponsor of our new investment management system. I am not a tech savvy person. But I knew how to manage people and hire people that could do that and be the voice and advocate from a change management perspective. That was what I needed to do in my role. Those aren't things that I knew early on, and I've come to learn later. And I think that some of those skills would help lawyers from the very beginning. If you didn't get them in law school, you can get them in other ways. And I think investing in that would be worthwhile.
So given that this conference is about leadership, I think, again, this advice on how to harness your power to become an effective leader is such a great way for us to really end this conversation. So I want to thank you, Connie, for all of your time, for your invaluable insights, for your friendship. I wish we had more time so that we could go into how you were so successful in getting your board seats and your role at the Women's World Banking. But hopefully another time when we can reconnect and really highlight all of those many accomplishments. So thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. It's always fun to have a chance to talk with you.